Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Trinisphere. This is Season 3, Episode 2, and we are going to be talking about political signaling. I am Adam the Johnny, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Ryan the Spike.
What's up?
And Shannon the Timmy.
How's it going, guys?
All right, so we are going to jump right into it and start talking about political signaling in EDH.
You forgot to introduce the jazz player.
The jazz player?
He's a little upset.
What are we talking about?
The guy in the painting. We talked about him last time.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You forgot to introduce him.
He's a jazz pianist, and I believe the painting is by Justin Bois.
And it's the fourth member of the Trinisphere.
There you go. He's the Melvin. You got to clue me into these bits before you throw them out there.
I'm sorry.
All right. So, political signaling in EDH. So, what exactly are we talking about here? We've got a couple different type of signals that you can get from players. We're going to talk about verbal signaling, nonverbal signaling, and then using those signals to your advantage throughout the game. So let's talk about verbal signaling first, since it seems to be the most common, at least that people are able to pick up on. So what kind of signaling do you guys throw out there when you're playing EDH?
Hate fire.
Hate fire? That's not much of a signal.
pure vitriol coming
pure
from him.
Vitriol. Okay, fair.
He's just like, I'm gonna go full tilt on some people. Now, some of the things that I would probably throw out during a match includes kind of threats are one of the most basic level of politicking is threatening someone if they come at you. Be like, if you come at me, I'm gonna destroy your creature. Go someplace else.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes promises. Yeah, and there's so many layers to politics that we can talk about any one of these subjects for quite a long time.
Absolutely.
But let's go over just the signaling part. So we'll just skim past some things. So there's threatening, there's negotiations, there's kinds of things like that. A lot of what politics, in my opinion, is the exchange of hidden information,
right?
Which I think is one of the reasons that spikes tend to not like politicking or the politics part of EDH, is because it is so completely different from how normal competitive Magic works.
Right.
Hidden information in a 1v1 is hidden information and it's protected. But in politicking and in EDH, hidden information is freely exchanged between the players in the game through verbal communication between each other and also nonverbal signaling, which you can pick up on. But yeah, there's tons of different ways that we can verbally signal each other, whether it be indicating that we have removal when they're attacking us.
Yeah.
Even so much as saying, "Are you really going to do that?" Just the subtle threat of them coming at you can sometimes work.
I've noticed some people even being boastful about it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They're just like, "Come at me, bro. I dare you."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so those are the things you can pick up on. I mean, it's very obvious when somebody is asking you to come at them. It's that they want to blow you out, right?
Right.
Yep. They want to put you in a situation where they can hilariously humiliate you with a spell or something like that.
Right.
So those are something sometimes that you can pick up on and avoid. When people start threatening you, that's something that you can try and follow up on and see, do they bluff a lot in EDH?
Right.
Do they follow through with their threats? Which goes into the whole concept of bluffing or making threats that are ambiguous enough that you can work your way out of not having been caught in a lie.
Well, let's talk about the negotiating part, because I think the negotiating part kind of covers a lot of these different things. I'm going to give some examples of what I like to call the Shannon special. Shannon has some of the most effective negotiating in our play group, and it's really centered around, I'm not your enemy, or I'm not your target. Anything to get you to not go after him. And he's such a good salesperson. It's amazing. It drives me insane. Because he could easily be like a step away from winning the game and just sell to somebody like, no, that person with a 1-1, that person's who you have to go after. Look at their state. So I think that the negotiating kind of goes in a couple different directions. Like, you're sometimes negotiating for your board state to stay what it is, and then other times you're actually negotiating for them to do your dirty work for you. Like the verbal signaling almost goes in a different direction of like just straight out manipulation. Like, hey, you go do this though.
Timmy's love manipulating spikes.
And we can brush on real quickly like threat assessment, which is one of the main ways that I spend in games manipulating the board is and once again we can go really deep into this stuff, so we can talk about it another time, but I have what I've conceptually called like a karma bank, in which I build up trust amongst the other players, and then I cash that in at certain points in time. And some of the ways that I build that up through verbal signaling is, for example, early in the game when they cast a removal spell, and it's very blatant that I have the best target on the board. It's very obvious that there's no way to talk my way out of getting blown out by this removal spell. I lean into it. I go straight for it, and I go, oh yeah, you're definitely going to target my Soul Ring with that. Like that's just a no-brainer, man. I'm not even going to try and say you should blow up that other guy's, shittier artifact in the corner. I'm going to say, you need to blow up my Soul Ring. That's the best target. And so right then you started to build a trust relationship with that person, where they start to believe the things that you're saying. They start to think that, oh, Shannon's an honest person. He will always admit the best target. And that's building up the karma that you can then cash in later in the game when it's a more sketchier and grayer area, when they have to choose targets and they're not exactly sure who's a step away from comboing off. Then you could be like, oh, well, I think you should blow up Adam's thing, and I haven't lied to you yet. And they go, oh, well, Shannon hasn't lied to me yet. He's admitted that he's had the best target almost every single time. So I'm going to trust him. I'm going to blow up Adam's thing instead of Shannon's thing. And that's kind of like the whole building up trust and then cashing it back in later in the matchup.
So basically Shannon's saying, be the kind of person that could easily have been your friend for the last 5 years, but really been an assassin that was hired to kill you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you remember our first Kingdoms game where you thought I would fight the entire match until I killed you?
Yeah.
Those are the next level backstabbery that I enjoy sometimes.
Yeah. But I do think that you're right in the threatening is the kind of I don't want to like take other people's catchphrases or anything, but like the bread and butter of EDH. You really lean on that. And I found that threatening is, while effective, I think that people don't force people to have it enough, like, oh, if you swing at me, I'm going to kill your thing. Well, okay. I mean, a board wipe comes every 2-3 turns in EDH. Who cares? You need to make them have that removal spell, because it could be a game-winning play if they don't.
Right. You want to get rid of the spell when it's less important to the impact of the game. You want them to burn the counter when it's not a game-winning spell, and you want them to burn the removal when it's not lethal, kind of thing. So yeah, definitely signaling is something that you can try and play around with. When somebody threatens you, you can just challenge them and see if they've got it. Because here's the biggest thing about threatening someone. You need to be able to back it up, or your reputation is permanently damaged. If you can't back up a threat, then everyone will know that you are full of shit when you threaten.
Yep.
And that makes it much harder to threaten people going forward. So you have to be very careful when you threaten people that you're able to follow through with it, or you threaten them in an ambiguous way enough that you can get yourself out of this situation. If you have to back it up, instead of saying I'm going to destroy your creature, say I'm going to mess up your board. I'm going to mess up your game plan.
Right.
You give yourself a little bit more like breathing room and room to work in, so that if you don't have removal in your hand, you can still kind of bluff a little bit.
Right.
But then you can also set forth a game plan to rebuild the dangerous reputation by getting back at them.
Well, I mean, a great example of that, like somewhat ambiguous threatening, is what Ryan did, and ultimately it didn't work in Ryan's favor, and and it's questionable whether the play was right or not. But when we were playing the game where Ryan was playing Surku, he didn't say, "I'm going to kill you," or "I'm going to get you back for that." He was just like, if you make this play, you're going to lose the game. That was his threat. Yeah. And he actually called out who was going to kill me. And I mean,
it wasn't a threat. It was just a
it was an assessment. Yeah.
Play was so atrociously terrible that it was going to put you out of the game.
He's not salty. He's not salty.
No. There's never any salt.
How could I be salty for someone just playing Magic poorly?
I feel like that's almost your tagline. Salty for people playing Magic poorly.
No,
Playing
just
with a bunch of
no.
scrubs.
That's just a personal dilemma that I deal with. That's completely separate from Magic. That I just can't handle stupid people.
Oh God,
Oh,
that's his vice. That's his vice.
That's his
I would
vice.
say.
Hating
Yeah,
stupid people.
yeah. It's something that he's working on.
Hey man,
He's
we're all working on something, right? Life's a
Definitely.
journey.
Definitely.
Life is a journey.
Life's a journey. Book it.
Um,
Anyways, back to verbal signaling.
Right.
So, all right. So we talked a little bit about like threat assessment, and also threatening. Threatening is like one of the most basic level of politicking. That's what everyone starts with, and hopefully they get over it kind of quickly. They stop using that so much because it is kind of dangerous. Like I said, if you can't follow up, then it damages your reputation. So
it also seems just like oddly reactive. Like almost everybody just does it out of habit.
yeah,
Like, oh, I'm
yeah.
gonna get you. Okay. Well.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, but also, you can, if everyone at the board threatens you and you attack, you just assess which one is the most probable that you can, they have it, which
Right.
is dangerous because if they're good at threatening, they'll know that they have to, bound by honor, follow through with their threat at some point in time. Or you go with the person who's just less likely to be able to overwhelm you. You just feel like, if you want a 1v1, we can 1v1.
Right.
So that can segue into kind of one of the other problems that happens a lot in EDH, which is the tit for tat kind of thing, where when you get into a scrap with someone, they feel like they must exact revenge on you. And then you get stuck in a 1v1 in the middle of a 4-man pod, which is kind of a tough thing that happens. People say, if you attack me, I'm going to go at you for the rest of the game.
Right.
And you're like, you have to sit there and evaluate, okay, well, is he going to follow through with that plan? Probably. I know a lot of people in our group, especially Timmy's, anybody who has trouble with threat assessment or doesn't want to deal with threat assessment will just look for an easy way to single one person out and then focus on them for the rest of the game as a game plan. So if you give them an excuse to target you, you're stuck in a 1v1 with them for the rest of the game. Meanwhile, the other people in the corner are comboing off kind of thing. So that's something you have to be aware of. The whole tit for tat thing, knowing when to de-escalate the situation, knowing when to disengage in a 1v1 and say, you know what, I've had enough of this getting revenge on each other. I'm going to deal with the other real threat over here.
Right.
But aggro and de-aggro, another topic for another day.
Yeah. I mean, I think
so much depth.
What you have down here of like the quid pro quo thing is also kind of another really common like low tier tactic that you have from verbal signaling where somebody will almost outright say like, hey, I have a return to dust. I'm going to get rid of that one threat that is clearly threatening you as long as you do something for me. Keep me in the game an extra turn. Just don't come at me in general. Sometimes it's just like the handshake or verbal handshake of we're good until we're not.
Oh yeah. You would not imagine how often the phrase "we good" is thrown around in our group, which is like a one-turn non-aggression pact to deal with a certain threat.
Well, that's my problem with it. It's an indefinite time frame. Like
I think it should be known, and I only ever consider it for about one turn, or I guess some people may consider it for kind of like a ambiguous amount of time. But I would say that it would last until the current situation drastically changes. If the person I'm good with plops down another piece of their infinite combo, then we're not good. If they're one step away from winning, then we're not good anymore.
Right.
If we blow out the person that we were collectively working against, then we're not good anymore. Like I'm not. So as a Timmy, I enjoy basically grinders of games that last a long time and are really fun and everyone has a chance to play. As opposed to Spikes, who would probably focus down and kill someone as fast as possible, get them out of the game so it reduces their number of opponents. So sometimes when we topple a king, when we work together to destroy a king, and we set them basically back into the Stone Age, I basically let up on the gas. I say, okay, I'm going to reassess threats right now, even before they're dead. And then because I consider them basically an ally at this point, as long as I wasn't the main reason that they were completely blown out, then I effectively have an ally against what was originally my other ally. So
I would like to explain why Spikes go for the kill and get it out of the way. I feel like there has to be some sort of level of defense. You can't just say Spikes only kill people to kill people.
Yeah. Go on.
So you have to understand. So from a player's perspective, from a Timmy's perspective, you want the game to last as long as possible, right?
Definitely. I think
Okay.
I want the game to be. I want everyone to have a chance to shine. Effectively,
Correct.
if each 4 players had a chance to be the king for a moment in time, that would be a killer game for me.
And if a spike's ultimately just looking for the win, right? It's looking for that goal. And that's all we're trying to achieve at the end of the day. When you start poking someone, regardless of their retaliation, like let's say you poke them hard enough to where like they're just currently out of the game and they're not able to poke back because you're messing with them too much. The second you take up off that, they can EDH decks are realistically designed to be super redundant and super resilient. So you pump the brakes and you leave them alone for a turn or two. All it takes is a cultivate and a rampant growth to put them back up to 7 mana, 6 mana, and they're right back in the game because one 7 mana play can swing a game completely.
Yeah, I hear you.
So like realistically, if you're gonna go for that, if you're really going for the win, and you pick a target, and because that's the other thing too, is a good spike understands if I'm sitting down with an aggressive deck, if I don't kill that control player in the first 8 turns, I'm probably not going to win this game at all. Because once that control player sinks his reps, the game's over for me.
Yeah.
So
it's totally understandable that you. I mean, there's a lot of the other podcasts I've been kind of brushing up in collating all of the political theorizing in EDH. And I think it is the Command Zone did one about The Prince by Machiavelli, and they were using some of those theories and applying them to EDH. So they were talking about one of the big things is, I think one of the different chapters of teachings is about being either kind to your enemies or destroying them entirely. You never go in between, because if you leave them alive, then you have more enemies. If you keep switching between targets and stuff like that in EDH, you're building up more and more enemies without actually eliminating any of them.
Yeah.
And so eventually you're building yourself into an arch enemy mode kind of thing. So yeah, there's I mean, I don't blame that at all. That theory is absolutely sound. Every time a spike said to me, I went at somebody and I knocked him out because I want 2 enemies, not 3. That's totally logical, in game theory included.
Yeah.
You want to knock out. I mean, I remember playing like real-time strategy games, and when you use your units, you focus down and kill things as fast as possible. You don't let them deal damage to random targets. You focus all of them on one target and blow it up immediately. That way you reduce the overall firepower of your opposing, the other side of the other board. So anyways, yeah, so when it comes to like king toppling and verbal signaling, there's a ton of that goes around, and it's kind of one of the mainstays. And when people offer deals to you, like let's group up and take down the king, that is like one of the best things that can happen, because that means someone else is going to be expending resources on a target other than you. And I love it when anyone will use their resources for me. That's like my favorite thing in Magic. I love it when somebody. Also, we can talk about the turn priority order, but that's more of the non-verbal signaling thing. We can talk about that in the next section, but I'll go back into that. But when people offer deals, a hey, we good, I almost always will take that deal, because I know that they're going to do something, and they're not going to do it to me.
Right.
They're going to use it on one of my enemies. So that is a huge valuable asset when somebody offers a deal. So I don't know. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I have tried to move away from those type of deals only because I feel like, myself included, players recant on those really easily and at indefinite intervals. I mean, you're just kind of like, okay, we're good until we're not, which that point is not clearly discussed or defined by anybody at any point.
And you don't like sit down and hash out a contract that you both sign. It's kind of like an unwritten thing.
Right.
And like I said, for me at least, it's as long as the board remain in its current situation. If we're both under the heel of a king and we're trying to topple him, as soon as the king's toppled, all bets are off. And that doesn't, for me, necessarily mean he dies. It just means that his board is dealt with.
Right, but because that's not part of the verbal conversation, the verbal signaling, because the quid pro quo is not defined, I'm trying more to stay away from those, because or be very ambiguous in my answers, like, we good? I don't know. Depends on what you do.
Yeah, that's the other thing is the brutal honesty of, are we good? And you're like, No, we're not good. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you and say we're good and then immediately kill you.
Right.
I'm gonna be like, listen, we're not good.
Yeah.
You're one step away from going infinite. So I'm gonna deal with you on my turn, kind of thing. So
yeah,
there's that too. Another really big thing about verbal signaling is honesty. You know, a lot of the areas that I operate in, like I talk about, are kind of like a gray, ambiguous area, but I never want to be caught in a lie, because being caught in a lie, do that damage to your reputation, makes it much harder to negotiate and influence people in the future. So never being caught in a lie is like rule number one.
Yeah.
And you know, it's easy to not be caught in a lie if you just don't lie. My big thing, I do lies of omission. I don't verbally say a lie. When it's time to lie, I shut up and I don't say anything. I let people say the wrong thing. Like I let Zach, you know, in one of our matchups, mistakenly say I don't have enough mana to activate and fling
Right.
a thing. I just don't speak up. I'm just like, yeah, I you know, I don't say anything. I don't say yes or no. I shut my mouth.
Well, because that's
the
known
whole time I'm
information.
sitting there also no, I mean, it was not known to the whole table because I just sat there and watched it happen.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. What I mean by that is it's not hidden information.
No, it's not. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and beyond that, even if it is hidden, I will just opt to not speak up. So, you know, if you guys want to take anything away from this, is when I'm not talking is when you probably need to be paying attention, because I'm not saying something because I know if I say something, it would be a lie. So
the key
hashtag
is
known
silence. So if we just knock Shannon out before each match, he'll never be able to lie.
Truth, or he'll always be lying if I'm not talking.
Or he'll always be lying.
All right, so let's kind of transition a little bit into nonverbal signaling, which I think is something that is more difficult for most players, especially newer players, to pick up on, and B, becomes a little bit more nuanced. And I think Shannon just kind of touched on one of his, tells, as it were.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, me being quiet during, okay. So like I talked a little bit earlier about I verbally acknowledge targets,
right.
Especially when it's obvious that I'm the one who needs to be hit. When I don't talk about the targets is when I really need my target to not be blown up.
Right.
Usually when people are negotiating targets and I'm not talking, I do have probably the best target on the board, and I'm being quiet about it because I don't want it to be hit. So, there's certain players that are more nuanced in negotiation and politicking that you can look out for. When they stop talking, why are they not talking? Why are they not participating in this conversation? That's kind of something you could look out for. But yeah, one of the other really big ones I'd like to talk about is the priority order. And I mentioned in the last episode how there are people calling me an angle shooter. They call me an angle shooter because of some of the practices that I follow. So short story, somebody on Reddit was asking about tips for a new player. And I had mentioned that very frequently in a group of new players, when somebody casts a game-winning spell, before anyone follows turn order, before we go in the order of turns, being the person to the left of the person who casts a spell starts first and then go all the way around the table. Before any of that happens, somebody on the other side of the table blurts out counterspell before anyone has a chance to say anything.
Right.
And that is a thing that happens very frequently in EDH.
Oh, yeah.
People don't follow turn order. And as I mentioned before, like a couple minutes before, I absolutely love it when people expend their resources when I don't have to. That's a free card. That's free mana, effectively. If I don't have to tap out to cast my spell and they do, that's free mana and free cards. So when somebody casts a spell, sometimes I'll pause a little bit and I'll think and I'll look at my hand and I'll look at my mana and I'll look at the board. And that is, in fact, what people would call angle shooting, because what I'm doing is I'm giving everyone an opportunity to also look at their hands, and maybe somebody who's not familiar with turn order priority to blurt out counterspell.
Right.
And thus violating turn order, making it so that I don't have to use my own counterspell. So that's something that you can do. It's kind of in the grayer area of nonverbal, is that some people will indicate that they have a counterspell or flat out use their counterspell before you even need to.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that I agree and disagree with the concept. Like, I don't know. It sounds very shady, like depending on that, or like intentionally keeping silent for 5 seconds or so to like see if somebody screws up. That part sounds a little shady. But I totally agree with the concept of maybe after they cast it, if I have priority, saying to somebody like, does anybody have a way to deal with that? Like, and act like I don't have a way to deal with it. And then if nobody responds to that, kind of having a little bit more of a verbal interaction. But if nobody responds to that, then maybe I take care of it, because you absolutely want other people to waste their spells first.
Yeah, and so that's kind of like one of the when we tie it back to verbal signaling, there usually is a negotiation that happens when a spell is cast, and that is something that you can pick up on both verbally and non-verbally. Is you ask that question: is anyone going to be able to deal with that? Like, are we dead to this card?
Right.
And you're looking at the other people and you're gauging their responses, right? You're gauging whether or not they're confident that we're not dead, or they're kind of deflated because they don't have a way around that.
Right.
You're looking for nonverbal cues such as their posture, the way they're looking at their cards, are their shoulders up or their shoulders slumped? Are they leaning forward or backwards? That kind of thing. You're looking for like different signals to indicate whether or not they have a way to deal with the situation. And if you start to get a lot of these positive signals, you can allow it to resolve, because you can be confident that this is not a threat that's immediately going to defeat you as an individual. And the pod as a whole has to deal with these threats, so you can let somebody else deal with it effectively.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Ryan? Is this all bull malarkey to you?
No. Personally, the way I look at it when it comes to my favorite thing to do is when someone does the whole like plays a big spell kind of thing, I just yell out priority. I blurt it out.
I mean, that's perfect. That's exactly how you should. That's how you should go about it.
Immediately, if someone goes like they announce a spell, I go priority.
Yeah. You point to the person to the left of you and you go, "Do you have a response?"
Yeah.
And then when they say no, you point to the next person and go, "Do you have a response?" You don't give them a chance to negotiate, right?
I literally don't. I shut that shit down so fast. I do it on purpose every time, because I want people at the table to understand what their job is, and they don't have time to discuss this shit. It's handle it or move on. Because I don't want, personally, I mean, I know you love the story, and I know that can prove for interesting plays and stuff like that. But that one play could turn into a 10-minute debate or political debate about who's going to handle it. When in all reality,
absolutely, yeah.
When all reality, the person of priority had to negate the whole time, but they just didn't want to fucking use it.
Exactly. Yeah, that definitely is true. And there was a lot of I talked to a guy about it for quite a bit, more of a competitive player, and he kind of indicated that this is where competitive and where the political aspect of EDH completely like bashes heads with the competitive side, because in 1v1 hidden information is protected, right? And then whereas in EDH is freely exchanged, in politics it's freely exchanged. So when you pass turn to somebody and they begin the discussion with the group, are you guys going to be able to deal with that? What they're basically saying is, should I pass priority to you confidently that this spell will be dealt with?
Right.
And when you do that, in this competitive player's mind, this was a violation of the concept of priority order, because effectively by asking someone if they can deal with it and then saying, yes, I can deal with it, you have effectively passed priority to that person. You have acknowledged that you are not going to deal with it and that they are going to deal with it, or you at the very least have entered into negotiations with that person. But because
I can't agree with that. I mean, you haven't passed priority to somebody just because you have a conversation with them.
But if you were in a purely competitive game where no hidden information is exchanged, the only option is whether or not you're going to counter that spell.
Yeah.
And when you enter into negotiations and you start exchanging information, you know that another person is going to counter that spell, so you can pass your priority. If you find out information about whether or not you need to deal with it during your turn with priority, it's almost like you're violating how turn priority works in general. You are gathering information about turn priority. It's almost like you're passing it to the other person,
right?
And then they're negotiating, and they're passing it back to you,
right?
And then you're passing it to the other person, and then it's bouncing back and forth until someone actually deals with it, which is kind of like.
Yeah, if you do adopt that play style, I think that the threat assessment thing becomes even more integral to where, I mean, I think that there are a few people in our play group and that I've played with in the past and things that, I'll say, you're using counter spells incorrectly, because most EDH decks, you only have a finite number of counter spells. You should only be using those when your game is going to end.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
When you are directly going to die is when you should use a counter spell.
Yes. There's only two instances. They're about to win the game and you need to stop them, or you're about to win the game and they're trying to stop you.
Right. So, I mean, I think that you do have to pay attention to that a lot more if you're in that kind of scenario where it's like, there's not going to be any negotiation, so I need to do everything at instant speed and in order to stop somebody, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I mean so how people react, and there's a lot of bluffing that goes on during that phase too, nonverbal signaling that goes on during there. I think one of my happiest moments in an EDH match was somebody cast a game-winning spell, and then I kind of did the priority check where I asked, is anyone able to deal with that? And what I got from another control player was a bluff. He said, "No, I didn't have anything to do with that. I have no way to deal with that." But I could tell, I had a feeling, like an inkling from the way he was posturing about it, that he did have a way to deal with it. And I had a counter in my own hand, and I said, "You know what? Let's gamble. Let's pass priority past myself along through the rest of the group and see if he's going to let this game end right now,
Right.
because the spell's going to win the game, or he's going to fess up about lying and use his own counterspell."
I mean, in all fairness, like when you're playing a game, I honestly don't think that it's a horrible thing to lie about certain things, especially like if your opponent is asking you, "Hey, do you have this in your hand? Like, are you gonna stop me?" Like, like Zach asked me that when we were playing the pre-con league. He was like, "Oh, I guess if you have a Bant Charm, and you're just gonna blow me out." And I was like, "I took that out of my deck." And I Bant Charmed him and won the game.
Fucking liars! God dang.
God, that's so sleazy. I refuse to lie. I refuse to do it.
I agree too. I will just be mum about it. I'll be quiet as a freaking mouse in a butcher house.
Right.
But anyways,
well, let's talk about that. Let's move to the changes in behavior, because there's a lot of these that happen. The quiet thing happens for different people for different reasons.
Yes.
And then there's like the loud thing, and then there's the angry thing. Like, I think those are separate from each other on some occasions.
Well, I think they're all definitely tools.
Yeah.
And we can go into kind of, we'll do another episode about using social interaction to manipulate people, but there's definitely something to be said about getting angry at people. Because everyone has this, social like compass that,
right,
or almost like not even like a moral compass, but like a comfort compass that always wants to be centered towards everyone's happy. And as you start to stray from it, as one person starts to get more and more pissed off, you're less and less likely to do something negative to them. You're more likely to do something positive to them. So as people get angrier, or this is something that I'm probably guilty of, is I use nonverbal signaling because obviously you guys have come to realize a lot more recently that I do a little bit of chicanery behind the scenes.
right.
So I stopped doing more of the verbal things and started doing more of the nonverbal things. So something as simple as when they blow up one of my things, I'll kind of just slouch back in my seat. I'll just be like, "Oh man, I'm almost out of this game." Like I'll slump back in my seat and lean back and set my cards on the table and maybe like act like I'm distracted to watching something else because I'm blown out of this game because you did that to me. And that sends a signal to you. It's like, well, Shannon's kind of like kind of on the back foot now. I can drop him on threat assessment a little bit, and B, I kind of pissed him off, or I kind of made him like unhappy with the situation.
Right.
So maybe I'm less likely to then use a spell on him, and maybe I use it on somebody else next time. And that's something that's actually pretty effective, I would say, with certain people. People who are more apt to having a good time. It works really well with Timmys. They pick up on these things and run with them. Spikes, not so much. They're ruthless as fuck. So they'll smell blood in the water and they'll go for the kill. And then of course Johnny's will chill in the back just trying to combo off. But
yeah,
this is a good strategy against Tim if you have a lot of Timmys in your group and they just love to have like hilarious stuff happen. You kind of giving the impression through non-verbal means that you're no longer having a good time works really well against them. They say, "What am I doing? This is not fun for certain people, so maybe I'll pivot a little bit and change how I'm going to threat assess and that kind of thing."
Which I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's just a different form of lying.
I mean, yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
let's not say
All
like
I've
where
ever
it
said
gets
is
lying.
I never speak a lie.
Oh, fair enough.
I only omit lies, and I only do lying when I am not talking.
So Ryan, what about you? What kind of like if you're playing against like for example me and Shannon or like Zach or Matt or whatever, like what kind of things are you looking for in someone's demeanor as a signal that they're either on track or they have something up their sleeve or they've got absolutely nothing? What are you looking for as a signal there?
Yeah, I mean, personally, like I think game development itself kind of signals for you. If someone's going ramp, 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 you know something's coming, so you automatically already, you know what I'm saying, like you already have a feeling and understanding where things are turning in the game just from that aspect.
Right.
When it comes from like a specific individual that I look at, I I look for because you always notice in the first like 2 to 3 turns, it's super casual. People are always
Oh
like
yeah.
land go, draw, land go, and then someone plays a spell, someone plays a spell, and then someone does something that's a little bit like over the top compared to everyone else, and everyone kind of like pumps the brakes and looks at each other. And you'll see a look around the table when someone does something like
Yeah.
Karns on turn 4 or something, and right then in that moment, that's when you see a power shift, and everyone kind of when that first big spell goes, you can kind of like by the way that everyone reacts, you just take a second and stop. Don't look at what just happened. You don't care about what just happened. You have plenty of time to answer whatever that is. There's nothing wrong with taking 2 minutes to assess a play. So right when that play happens from that player, look at the table instead of the play. Like look at the people. And if someone's like eyes widen or someone just kind of like shrugs it off, clearly they don't care about it, or they do, and maybe they don't have something. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You can read just someone's reaction to a play at the table can give you enough information, and that's early. That's early on, early plays, like someone ramping twice, being like, someone might mumble under their breath, or someone might roll their eyes at someone ramping harder because they don't have that. They wish they did. You know what I'm saying? Or
Right.
someone drew a couple cards, or you hear them like when you see them draw a card and it wasn't what they wanted. People make faces all the time and they don't realize it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, like
definitely.
I think the biggest verbal or nonverbal signal that I see, from people changing their behavior is usually when you either have somebody who ramps for like 4 turns and then just doesn't do anything except for sulk in their seat. Like they're just like draw, pass. It's like, okay, that person's practically out of the game.
They're literally looking for a top deck, and even if they hit it, it's like, what are they gonna do?
Right, they've got one thing, unless they go runner, like big stompy, they're still not going to get there. When somebody's like off a color early on, and you're like, okay, and then they like draw and they play another land, and they're still like sulking. It's like they have nothing but double blue in their hand, and they've got like a single blue source out,
Yeah. I think a lot of people have different tells that you can pick up on as you're playing.
Mine
you can
are
read
easy.
people. You have some obvious ones. I actually have some pretty obvious ones too, I've noticed.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm poised to win the game, I stand up out of my seat. Like, have you ever seen me stand up? And I don't know why I do this, and I don't even realize I'm doing it. If I stand up out of my seat, it's probably because I'm about to win. Try to win.
Things are getting hot. The seats are getting hot.
I need to be able to see the whole goddamn board.
Yeah.
Like I can't just. Yeah, it's a real obvious one. So you see. Me
I think that I see
30
that
of your
you
counterspells.
you get loud too when you think that you're about to be able to turn the game in your favor in a turn or two.
Yeah.
Like that's when you start the
true.
loud negotiating. When you're like,
Right.
no, you totally go after this, and you start like yelling at other people to do things. That means Shannon has the game in 2 turns if you don't deal with them.
Oh, probably. That means I saw the out. I saw the way out of the situation, probably. But a lot of people have different tells that can indicate, just how their game plan is going, which is a little bit more. It's less, you can't really act on that kind of information as well as you can.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other smaller tells that we can talk about, such as when somebody draws a card, how do they act?
Mm-hmm.
Do they look at their mana when they draw the card? Do they look at a creature when
do
they draw
look
a
at the
card?
board state?
Yeah, exactly. It gives you indicators as to what kind of spell they drew. Did they draw? If they look at their mana, is it just a creature? If they look at your creatures, is it a removal spell then?
Right.
There's a lot of these other pieces of information that you can pick up to kind of determine how the game is going, and it's something you really should look out for because this is such a board wipe heavy format that you don't want to overplay into a board wipe.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of another thing that we can talk about at a different time. But getting an idea of when people are going to board wipe is a very valuable tool that I try and use. Is also even pressuring them into board wiping if they're not doing it. But knowing when that's going to come and when they're digging for it, that kind of thing, is extremely useful, I think, in EDH. Even if they're not talking about doing it, you can kind of see the signs when they're starting to main phase out, draw spells and stuff like that, and they're getting hammered. They're looking for a board wipe kind of thing. There's also a lot of other different kind of signals that happen, like them touching their mana during certain plays, and one of the most obvious things. Counting mana. Oh, that's the worst, right? Is when they start counting their mana.
Or I mean, or organizing.
That means they're trying to cast 2 spells in one turn. Yeah.
Or you see separated piles.
Yeah, you're like 2 blue over here. Let's see what else I've got.
Yeah, and then the fun game is let's guess the spells based on what the mana piles are.
But you can actually use that to your advantage. You can separate piles. Like I've separated 3 blue and a colorless just to bluff cryptic.
Bluff cryptic. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something you should always do as nonverbal signaling. Is always present a threat to your opponents. Never leave. If you have white in your deck and you have 1 land left, make it be a plains, because then that makes people second guess about solid attacking you with a single creature. And then the same with blue. You just always leave 2 or 3 blue open if possible.
Right.
You never want to leave like Reliquary Tower open.
Right.
Like that just says you're dumb.
That's just prioritizing mana spending. Different topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of other nonverbal signaling that you can learn to pick up on. So yeah, when you're casting a spell, you can kind of see how people are gauging their responses. This is something that happens a lot with some of the worst control players. Is that they kind of like gesture that they have a counter spell, but it's very clear that they are almost defeated when you cast a spell. And you're like, okay, sure, yeah, I'm gonna resolve this. They'll do like an idle threat or something along the lines, and then they'll let it resolve. It's something you can pick up on pretty easily.
Well, I mean, also like one of the more obvious counterspell threats that people throw out there sometimes is a really bad signal if you're playing blue, where somebody casts something and you're like, oh, hold on a second. Okay, yeah, never mind.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So
but
everybody
honestly,
watch out for that counterspell.
But that is something that you should do, right? Because if you only do a priority stop when you have a counterspell, then everyone knows. It's kind of like a bluffing situation. Sometimes you want to just indicate, because sometimes somebody picks up on that. They go, oh, Shannon has a counterspell. So if you do this on a spell that is not as relevant earlier in the game, especially like against a spiker, for example, if they cast like a medium creature and you're like, hold on, wait a second, let me think about that. Like, okay, all right, okay, I'll let that resolve because I doubt it's coming at me.
Right.
So they resolve that spell, and now Spike has you on 1 counterspell like count. He's like, oh well, Shannon probably has a counterspell. He just poorly threat assessed that situation. He thought that he may have needed to counter that creature. So I have a mental tick in the back of my mind that he has a counterspell that I have to work around. And so that's something you can use your advantage. Next time you have 2 mana open, the Spike might spot check you and goes, oh, how much mana you have open? You have 2 blue? Okay, well, I'm going to have to change my fucking game plan now.
Right.
Because I think you still have a counterspell because you broadcasted it earlier in the matchup. So you want to do these kind of like spot checks every once in a while and check everyone. If you only ever ask for a priority stop when you actually have it, then they know you don't have it when you don't priority stop.
Right.
You have to fill the void. You have to pepper in.
Exactly. You have to start bluffing false positives every now and then.
Something I specifically do in every game that I play is I always ask for hand counts. Just as a friendly gesture, I say hand count. What you got?
Right.
4, 7, 6. It just lets me know. I don't necessarily have a spell. I ask every single game, regardless of what I'm playing. It doesn't matter.
You can randomly take a look at people's graveyards too. Same thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. That's a really good one.
And that's something you should do, especially if you use graveyards. You want to do that not only when you have the spell.
Right. Be aware of what's actually out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're only doing these things when you have the spell, then you're just showing people your spell, when you do it. So you need to do it at other times and keep people guessing.
Yeah.
Is another way to put it.
Yeah. So I mean, kind of moving into the next topic. Though we've talked about it a lot, like using the signals to your advantage. We talked a little bit about baiting out spells. And I think that there's a lot of ways to do this. And one is that kind of like priority skip that Shannon brought up. Another one is by not necessarily doing that, but like having that conversation that Ryan was saying, like, I just kind of like force people through priority, which absolutely makes sense from the the player's standpoint.
Yeah.
But baiting out other people's spells, the other thing that you have to think about is doing that through explaining like what your deck does, which I have to do fairly often. Where it's like, what does that card do? It does this. I don't know. It's interesting, and kind of downplay a little bit, or upplay the viability of a card so that I can bait out a spell like, oh yeah, you might want to take care of that when I don't need that in order to win.
Right. Yeah, one of the strategies, that one I see a lot, which is somewhat pretty effective. Sometimes you're kind of very ambiguous, or sometimes you upplay a card.
Right.
That's something I do sometimes as well, and sometimes unintentionally. But I'll talk up how good a card is.
Yeah.
And that just puts a big target on it and people kill it. And sometimes I do that accidentally. Like they literally blow up my only win con. But
I call you out. I mean, not necessarily you specifically, but I call people out when they try and boast cards up for no reason.
Yeah. Oh no, you do a good job of just absolutely punishing me for talking about my cards.
Yeah, I mean the other thing,
I'm like, oh man, that works really well against me, and you're like, tutor for the card that he just said.
The other thing that you can do to bait out people's removal and bait out things in general is play a card that might not even be that good, or might not be good in that situation, that people have a really bad reaction to. Jace the Mind Sculptor being a great example. Like, Jace the Mind Sculptor is not that great in EDH. It has its applications, but it's not like as busted as it was in other formats by any means. But if you want to get some kind of board wipe that's going to get rid of walkers out of somebody's hand, play a Jace, and that thing will disappear in a turn, and you'll be clear to do whatever you want.
4-mana brainstorm.
Yep.
Yeah. One of the other things that I like to do, and obviously depends on the profile. It works differently against spikes and differently against Timmys. And it especially happens in two-headed giants. So it's kind of obscure, but you can still do this in a regular matchup. You can say, oh, well, obviously Ryan over there has counter mana open. And I'm going to say this out loud. I'll be like, Ryan obviously has counter mana open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run out my less important threat. I'm going to run out my medium threat.
I hate when people tell you do this.
When people point out, he does do that.
Yeah.
Shannon always fucking.
He's got to go for the throat open.
He always goes, yo, he's over there. You see that? You see what he's got going on? And I'm just like, why you got to do this? You're the only one who sees this. You're the only one.
I've got to put you on blast, bro. So people got you. It increases your threat level amongst the group. So what I'll do is I'll be like, well, I'm not going to run out my best threat. Obviously, I'm not going to run out my best threat into a counter spell, so I'm going to run out my medium threat. So, and this works differently depending on which profile you're interacting with. If a spike has it, you can actually be pretty fucking honest with this. You can be like, I have a better option. I'm going to run a medium option. The spike probably is not going to counter, because spikes, or not just necessarily spikes, but more experienced players aren't going to be baited into like countering a rampaging bailiff or something like that. They're not going to do that. Whereas it's almost, when you're interacting with like Timmys or people who are more impulsive, it's almost the opposite effect. It's almost like a challenge to them that you are in their head and verbally fucking with their mind, that they're going to prove to you that you don't know them, and they are going to counter that as soon as you cast it. It is almost effectively reverse psychology to use it on certain people. You can be like, oh, there's no way that they're going to counter this spell, because this is like, and they're like, fuck you, I'm going to counter that spell now. And they do it. And they do it a lot of the time. And this works actually pretty well. So this is involving
those people should stop playing counter spells immediately.
Yeah, oh yeah, and that happens a lot. I love it when people just, as soon as they have mana open, they're ready to counter the first thing. And I talk a little bit about like being directly left of a counter player who's new to Magic. They will counter the first thing they see. And then, the intermediate player will they want to use their mana effectively, so they will counter the last thing they see if there's nothing good to counter. So you don't want to be directly to the right of them. And then a good player, you can't really deal with that. They'll just counter the right thing at the right time. So, but anyways, Yeah, so using this kind of like reverse psychology can work on certain profiles and certain personality types. Yeah, spilling all the beans now, by the way. So
Yeah.
I'm sure my playgroup is going to be fucking eviscerating me from here on out.
So let's talk about bluffing for a second. So bluffing is a key strategy in EDH, especially when you're talking about any kind of politics. I think my favorite form of bluffing, and I'll throw this out there, and it kind of blows out my strategy. I play in most decks that have any counter spells in them. I play like 3, maybe. You're still muted, by the way, Ryan.
Sorry, you play like 3 maybe, and they're like trash.
Yeah,
Well,
they're obscure.
they're
obscure
usually
they're not the standard ones.
No, they're usually obscure, but honestly, I usually try to keep them at the ones that I wouldn't bluff anyway, or like
Yeah.
like I try to keep them like pact and negation instead of an actual counter spell, so that I can leave blue up the entire time. Or when I do tap out, somebody's like, "Oh, he doesn't have that counter spell mana up anymore," and I have the pact.
Yeah.
Same thing with Force of Will or something like that. So like I can signal the whole game that I'm playing counter spells without actually having to have the mana up for my counter spell.
Right. Yeah, and you can do that early on the game just by mentioning. It'd be really funny if I packed that and lost the game.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't have enough mana to pay pact, but wouldn't it be funny?
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, oh shit, Shan's running pact. Not like they can even do anything about pact.
Right,
you can't
right.
do anything about pact
Right.
negation. Like, can you can't like play
You can
around
counter
that
it.
card. Yeah, you can like get a second counter spell,
Right.
like so you can counter his counter when you counter. Yeah. So, but yeah, there's definitely a lot to be said about the gamemanship of showing you have or implying what you have.
Right.
And that is a huge part about bluffing. So one thing I really want to talk about real quick is the concept about showing cards to people. And that's something that came up recently. I was talking about to another podcaster about the concept of revealing hidden information. And I don't mean implying that you have hidden information. That's perfectly fine.
right.
That's within the realm of like politics, like safe politics. But when you go so far as to start showing that you
Right.
have things, whether it be showing the cards in your hand, you start to step a little bit across, like over a line. And I don't
Yeah.
want to say you're stepping. That's the wrong way to say it. You're not stepping over a line. You're not being a dick.
Right.
Because what you're doing is you're actually weakening the whole position of the whole bluffing and negotiation process. So for example, we used to play a game called Kingdoms, and some people might be familiar with that. It's also it's based off of the game called Bang, where everyone gets a roll and all the rolls are hidden, and you negotiate throughout the game and you try and position yourselves to win. And each person has a different goal to win the game.
Which, if you want to see us play that on one of our
I think
plays,
we have a gameplay of that.
comment below, and we may work in another one of those into the rotation.
Yeah, I'd actually love to do a game theory episode where we just talk about the game theory of Bang, because I always wanted to talk about. I love game theory. Computer science majors, so that's all I think about. But anyway, so in this matchup, we had a player. I was against another player. I think you were the king, maybe Adam, or maybe somebody else was the king.
Yeah.
And so the king goes, "Who is my knight?" There's only one knight in the matchup, and the knight is immediately allied to the king and the king's the most powerful player in the game. So it's very, very beneficial for you to say you're the knight. So one person says, "They're the knight," and I look at my roll. I'm not the knight, but I'm like, well, I'm going to also say I'm the knight, so it's not obvious who the knight is. So I say I'm the knight, and the guy goes, "Fuck you, I'm the knight, and I'll prove it." And I go, "Fuck you, prove it." And he goes, "I bet $100 that by the end of this game that I am proven to be the knight." And I go, "Man, you can't do that."
Right, because
Like,
you're almost breaking the fourth wall at that point.
Yeah,
like
you're effectively ruining the ability going forward playing this game for anyone to bluff.
Right.
Because if you just whip it out and throw it down, then how are you able to bluff next time?
Right.
Do you bluff? And if you do, how are you able to bluff if everyone's going to put the stakes up to a range beyond the game? So then this kind of thing applies, a lot to regular politics in EDH. When you start showing people the cards that you have, you're like, "Don't attack me. Here's my path to exile. I'm going to show it to you."
Sure, right.
You actually detriment your ability to next time say, "Don't attack me or I'll kill that creature," and maybe bluff your way out of that situation, kind of thing. And maybe that's something that you're interested in doing. Maybe you never lie, and maybe you never bluff, and maybe you want to actually weaken everyone's position. That's something you can do. But if you are someone who likes to negotiate and likes to try and position people and have a little bit of intrigue with your games, you don't want to be showing cards to different people all the time, because that severely weakens your ability to bluff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, taking it outside of the game like that is not. I mean, to me, that's just not good sportsmanship in the spirit of the game. Another interesting one about giving information away, hidden information, was a player in our group told me a story. He was at a competitive event. And so, you always have like your rules lawyers that go out there and they're like, oh, well, this is how, the different steps of casting a spell, which you should know. I'm not degrading that at all. But the guy's like, okay, so I'm casting a spell, and walks everybody at the table through the different steps. And he says, I'm declaring casting the spell. I'm calculating the mana cost for it. And then he's like, I choose not to pay the mana cost, and puts it back in his hand.
I've seen people like that, not gonna lie.
Right. And I actually don't know the specific rulings on that. Now, there are various steps to casting a spell, and those are them kind of. I mean, like the person described them to me, and I was like, that's the right order in which you do things. I don't know if you're just allowed to elect to stop casting it midway through cast.
Yeah.
I don't know that piece of it.
I talked a little bit about competitive, and I say that hidden information is protected, but it's a little more conceptual than it is factual. You can actually just in a competitive match reveal your entire hand to your opponent. That's not illegal. There's no rules against you giving your opponent hidden information.
Right.
There's rules about you attaining hidden information, without your opponent acknowledging it. But you will not get DQ'd by showing your opponent your hand. That is something that you can do. No, there is no rules against that. If you accidentally shuffle wrong and knock a card over, no one in a major competitive event will call a judge on you. Right. But there is definitely a different mentality about maintaining the strictness of gameplay, and that is something that I feel is why spikes sometimes have a little bit problems with politics, is because when you play 1v1, it's all about the tightness of your gameplay. It's all about being perfect,
right,
and not missing triggers, not making play mistakes, that kind of thing. But when you move to the politics world, it's so much more fluid and it's so much more organic. It doesn't matter if you make play mistakes. It matters if for whatever reason you can get someone to recover your play mistake for you. You can get someone to make up that mistake for you, which people are willing to do.
Surprising
definitely a lot.
amount, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the other
people want you to play the game. They genuinely do. They didn't want to play with you. They wouldn't let you play.
Right.
And that's kind of like the spirit of EDH, is that everyone gets to like play Magic, which is why like land destruction is frowned upon, and all these other stacks are kind of frowned upon.
Right.
Is because everyone wants to show off their cool brew, and so. With EDH, it's very. I see this a lot. I see spikes come to EDH and they get so frustrated. Ryan, you're pretty good at it, but sometimes you kind of shut off and you don't do any politicking at all. In fact, Ryan, I don't think I've ever seen you lie once, ever. I don't think I've ever seen you.
I mean, that makes sense.
Engage in politics.
It's okay. So here's the thing: is when it comes to politics, I kind of just stare everyone down and I say, you know who I am as a player, and I'm not gonna bullshit with you. I'm playing the game of Magic right now. That guy's about 3 turns from winning. That guy's about 2 turns from winning. That guy's not playing very much Magic right now.
Sometimes you don't verbalize that, and that is a tool that you can use because people trust you and your game prowess. Yeah, your ability to assess the board state better than them. And that's a tool that you can leverage in your advantage. You can point out when people are closer to winning.
You are 100% correct, and I do use it to my advantage. I always let the table know who's winning the game, and I have no problem admitting if I'm winning the game. I will let everybody know that if I just, Armageddon and I'm the only one with permanents to play, then I'm probably going to win if you guys don't do something. I have no problem admitting that. And this is also something that I have no problem with doing. When someone looks at me and says, "Are you going to win if I don't counter that?" I say yes. If this is I don't fact. If they say,
"Come at me, brah,"
they go, "Is that gonna be a really bad?" I say
it's gonna be real bad for you, boy.
You're probably gonna lose if you don't take care of this within this turn or next turn. But I'm just gonna be straightforward with you.
You got purty lips.
Because that honestly goes back into the Spike's nature, though. That kind of like falls into like Spike's being true to the game, because no one wants to kill an injured opponent. Like an injured kill is a lame kill. So
Right.
Absolutely.
So we're definitely when we're playing against an opponent who's making play mistakes, kind of like helping them along to like the finish line, just to cut their throat, makes it that much more satisfying.
Yeah. Spoken like a true ruthless motherfucker.
I mean, I think the other thing about like when people are bluffing too much and things like that, the old adage of just make them have it every single time is
I love that adage.
Right,
I love it.
Is probably what you should do.
I'm the complete antithesis of that. I don't want to play, and I don't. And I'm surprised, Ryan, that you're not willing to play around people.
So here's the thing. Okay, you have to take that with a grain of salt. You don't sit down at a table with 3 other blue players and make sure they don't have a counterspell every.
And just get your shit countered 100%
right.
of the time. Just feed them. Just feed that graveyard.
What I'm saying is, Magic games are short and fleeting. Like, I know they can spend an hour or two, but you're gonna play more games. The point is, make them have it. Don't play the whole game in fear that someone's got a counterspell.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, yeah, if you've got 3 blue players and everything is untapped, and then
exactly. Yeah,
and then they start
and
then you wait until they have maybe used some of their counter spells to counter each other and tinker with each other some. Obviously, wait for an appropriate time. But if somebody has some mana open and they're bluffing to still have a counter spell, you force them to have it. You have to. Otherwise, you're never going to progress the game.
Yeah. I mean, Adam, being a Johnny, you actually you that is your nature.
Yeah,
like,
I have to.
You have to commit to that because it's necessary. I'm not telling all players to, but from a Johnny's perspective, when you're a combo player, you got to go all in.
Yeah, this is my game-winning play. You either have the solution or you don't.
And let me tell you, someone who practices what I call the Munchkin theory, which is it's never proper to try and win first. It's always proper to try and win second. I appreciate the fact that you eat all the counter spells and removal for me. I'm really happy that you do that.
I think I honestly do come in second a lot because of that. But
yeah, you and as a Johnny, I think and we're going like deep off into like theoretical gameplay strategies,
right.
but I would venture that I would rather wait until the spikes blow each other up or the spikes blow the Timmy up, because the spike has to blow the Timmy up, right?
Yeah, at that point though, you do possibly risk the game just becoming stagnant and nobody being able to do everything. And if you're constantly waiting on the control player, that's just giving them more card draw. That's all you're doing.
That's true.
So but that they can draw more.
But if your deck is contingent upon just assembling 3 pieces, like it's a huge victory to assemble one of them. To get one of them countered, I think, is a pretty big setback. I don't know. I mean, it's different theories, and that's why we have this show, so we can talk about all of our different like philosophies on Magic. But like I said, the Munchkin theory. I will never try and win the game first. Because the person who wins the game first, if anyone who's ever played Munchkins, they know the person who tries to win the game first gets absolutely shit on by everyone. And they get knocked back into the Stone Age.
Yeah.
And so once the first king dies, that's
level 9 goes to level 1 real quick.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Their monster, their level 1 monster that they were going to fight for the win becomes like a level 34.
Yeah.
And they can't use their equipment or whatever. But anyways, and then you swoop in afterwards once everyone's burned all their fucking value. So, I know you espouse that idea a lot, but I try to avoid that one. Maybe not so well because leaving them with a removal spell, a counter spell, or a board wipe does dictate the flow of the game very much, and very much negatively. So there's definitely situations where I'm like, let's force them to do it. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Let's make them do it. And especially when it's in like an equitable advantage for them to board wipe or whatnot, because, if the Cyclonic Rift sets multiple players back as well as me, then I'll lean into it a little bit because we need them to get it out of his hand.
Right.
But then there's also other times where I think you should pivot and be like, okay, well, it's clear he's on don't let the game end horribly duty. So let's wait for somebody to try to end the game horribly before I do it myself.
Also, if the game state, I tend to lean toward that specifically when the game is in a binary state. I'm going to do this. You either have it or I'm gonna win the game. So you
Oh,
tell me which
yeah.
one it is. Like,
No, that's always a good. That's always a
Right.
good option. Like you don't want to just be like waiting a million turns for the exact perft moment where
Right,
everyone's
exactly.
tapped
Yeah,
out.
that's what I'm
Everyone's
saying.
tapped out and no one has cards in their hand. That's never gonna happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, earlier in the game, playing like value pieces that maybe not win the game, when there's blatant responses on the board is a bit risky in my opinion.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, and with that, we are going to wrap up the episode on political signaling. Check us out next week for another gameplay video where we've got some spice. There's no theme. We are just going for whatever brews we come up with. So for Spike, I'm sure it's going to be like some mono black control, boring stuff. Timmy, what are you, just green big stumpy things or something like that? I don't know.
I'm gonna hit you so hard. I'm gonna hit you so hard.
But anyway,
One hit kill. One hit kill.
But anyway, until
Thanks,
then,
Tom.
make sure that you share, like, subscribe, throw us some comments down below, and check us out on Facebook and Twitter and all the other social medias at the Trinisphere.
Yeah, new content every Tuesday, so be sure to subscribe so you get those messages. Also, there's new content coming out with whether it be deck text streams and that kind of stuff. So if you subscribe, you'll get notifications of that.
Yep.
But also in this video, because we're getting kind of saucy this season. Who do you think is gonna win next game?
Spicy
Ooh,
meatball.
Yeah, throw it
Who do
down
you think is
there.
gonna win next game? Let's call it. Let's call it right now.
We're just
Spikes.
Babe Ruth in this thing for the audience.
Oh yeah, Spikes, Johnny's.
Let's hold a poll on Twitter.
If anybody just saw my most recent card purchases, I think they can tell that I'm probably not.
Boy.
I gotta be honest.
Those were
with
on
what
Twitter.
with what I'm bringing, I saw your card draws and I'm like, I can't beat that. Oh shit. I might have to change my deck plan. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Well, so until then, keep brewing, my friends. We will see you next time.
Take it easy.